Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to announce our next session with Evan Lee. He is the head of partnerships and business development at Motion. Motion's integration with TikTok enables brands to connect their TikTok advertiser to any Motion workspace, allowing you to create custom reports, visualize TikTok data, and analyze creative performance. So Evan is going to get into how you can bridge the gap between data and creative on TikTok to make the most out of your TikTok strategy. So Evan, I will pass it over to you and you can go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you, Krista. I appreciate it. How's it going, party people? I am so excited to be here today. I always like to see the love of who's with us. So if you can and willing, would love if you could throw into the chat wherever you're dialing in from. I know you've probably done this a million separate times, but I just love to see it myself. And I know Toronto in the building. I'm eating into my 15 minutes, but I always love to know who is with us. Melissa knows party people. I celebrate with party people only. Amazing. Look at this. This is incredible. Hawaii in the building? What? Sweden in the house? South Africa? You all are the real MVPs. Thank you so much for your eyes and ears today. I'm excited. I'm excited. Mike coming in with the Super Bowl champs. Okay. So I wanna get into the meat and potatoes with you all today. Okay. So today, what I'm here to chat with you all about is creative strategy 101. How do we bridge the gap between data and creative, especially on TikTok? So I wanted to paint the picture just for all my data heads in here and all my creative folks in here of how we can just operate in lockstep and just crush it, continuously making the companies we work for more money. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is just like, why am I here? And like, why am I talking to you about this versus somebody else? And the main reason is because at Motion, we are the home for creative strategy. So everything happens within Motion. But you might be asking yourself, it's like, Evan, what the heck is creative strategy and how does that come to life? So I think the right way to set the stage is first align on what creative strategy is so we speak the same language, and then we're able to address it and move forward accordingly. Okay, folks? Fantastic. So when I'm talking about creative strategy, the first thing that I wanted to call out is that creatives become the most important lever for success in all of your paid advertising, especially on TikTok. When we're thinking about everything all the wonderful people have talked about today. But what we also know is like I called out a little bit earlier, there's two different types of teams, people, and brains that are involved. On one hand, we have the folks who are actually running these ads on paid social, our media buyers who are extremely data and analytical. And on the other side, we have our creative folks. So our creative team members who absolutely crush it, but are super creative and conceptual. The things that make each of these individuals super great at what they do ultimately creates this natural disconnect between the two sides of brain, team, and people. So when I'm talking about creative strategy, what I'm really referring to is how do we bridge the gap between what's going on so we're ultimately producing the best creative possible. Okay, folks? If you have any questions along the way, let's throw those into the chat and I'll try my best to field them as we make our way through. So let's go on this journey together. So the first thing that I wanted to call out is like, now that we're speaking the same language on creative strategy, it's like, why are we equipped to, or someone like myself equipped to actually walk you through this? So to solve this problem right now, I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing this, but the first thing that I like to call out is this work's usually happening in spreadsheets. So this pretty ugly spreadsheet right here. So our media buyers spend absolutely forever putting this together. And our creative folks, can you imagine looking at this? We're talking about creative people, not data, creative, looking at it this way. So at Motion, what we really focus on is we make it easy, well, super easy for everyone to visualize, analyze, and then action upon these findings as we move forward. So visualize, analyze, and action on what's going on there. But let's bring it back to actual creative strategy here. So now that we're speaking the same language and we have that ugly spreadsheet that's top of mind, you might be thinking to yourself, like, Evan, creative strategy, I'm there. So how do we actually start bridging the gap? So what I'm going to use the rest of my 9 minutes on this call to do is actually walk through how we can do this. And what this is all encompassed within is what we call creative sprints. So anyone who's familiar with like dev ideology and just like agile ideology, sprints is a formula we can bring to our world as well. And what that means is, to set the stage here, is that within a sprint, there are two types of creative outputs that ultimately occur. On one hand, we have our new concepts and variations. So think of these as your big swings. New concepts are like your marketing calendar campaigns, your major events throughout the year, new product launches, all that good stuff. Whereas your iterations are your smaller changes. So once you have some data, what small changes can you make to existing assets instead of taking big swings all the time? And once you're aligned on this specific output here, instead of just like consistently going through the hamster wheel of trying to figure it out, now we can prepare our brains for what's to come. So once you're aligned on what the output is, you can actually map this against a schedule that everyone can get behind. So you can see here, I know that my net new concepts are going to take way more time and effort versus my iterations. So that means from a team perspective, I'm committing to every 30 days doing net new concepts. Whereas on the iterative front, we're just doing way faster cycles because those are smaller changes. So maybe let's commit to every 14 days along the way. Because once you're able to make this happen with your creative and media buying teams, essentially what you've come to is a handshake agreement. How can we be on the same page of when deliverables are coming while putting data behind the work that we're ultimately producing? Okay, folks? Fantastic. Now, when we're looking at this, let's call it timeline, it looks really great, but the next thing to figure out is like, well, what do we do in each one of these buckets that we're looking at? And that's actually where I wanted to introduce the creative strategy flywheel. So within each of these buckets that you can see here, so all of the little dots, essentially what you can do is you can follow these set steps to produce and output the best creative possible while putting data behind the work that you produced. So I'm going to get into this in as much detail as I can, in all honesty, but we start right up top at research with building out your personas, understanding your pain points you're solving, all that good stuff. Your ideation is essentially your backlog. So how do you then prioritize what to hit these personas with? How do we then communicate to everyone who's involved in this process, create the content, evaluate and launch the content, and ultimately determine how it went instead of just leaving it and letting it fly into the abyss? Okay, folks? Fantastic. So let's jump into research first and foremost. So research is arguably the most important stage or step because ultimately it helps you build out who your personas and who you're going after. So when we're thinking about research, there's a lot of detail that you can get into, but I've just tried to simplify the heck out of it. Okay. So it comes down to 6 specific questions in 2 buckets. The first thing is what we know to be true about our brands. So you can really hone into the value props you know to be true, the selling points, your past purchaser data, and any historical performance across any other basically channels that you're using. But then the other thing that I wanted to call out is to understand what people are actually saying about you in the world. So what that means is you can start to look at your comments across organic paid and paid social. You can look at your reviews, whether it be on your website, Google, Amazon, anywhere it might exist. Or you can check out your tag post or For You page to see how people are actually posting about you and what that look and feel needs to look like. So all of these data points let you build the appropriate avatars and personas. Great. So now that we have a sense of what those pain points that we want to tackle are, the next step in our process is determining what to show those people so we can actually solve their pain. Now, I have a lot more details that like I can get into on another call or we have content in the world. But to simplify this, the goal and output of what your ideation phase is going to do is it's going to output a backlog. So shout out to Nicole. Check her out on Twitter. She's absolutely incredible. But what we're looking at here is essentially prioritizing based off of a number of different factors. So the impact, the ease to build, the categories, as well as like data points from the past to be able to say, hey, what are we actually going to look at to be able to solve this? Fantastic. So once we've built out this backlog, we've done a whole lot of work. But the thing is like, because we've done all this work, we need to make sure that we translate this well to whoever is producing a creative element for us. So that's why briefing is so important here. Now, briefs are actually going to vary depending on teams, companies, structures, all that good stuff. So I'm not trying to reinvent briefs by any means. That's not my goal. The main thing that I wanted to be able to call out with briefing is actually making sure that you have a hypothesis that you call out to everybody. Because once you state the hypothesis, everybody can get behind that and ultimately then align on what you're trying to solve. So in my case, when I'm thinking about briefing, and I've pulled an iterative example. So on TikTok, we can see different data points of who's engaging with our videos. And in my hypothesis, what I'm looking at is like I'm looking at my 2 and 6 second watch rate. So it's like who's actually stopping their scrolls in their feed to watch the first 2 seconds of my video. Because guess what? We need someone to stop their scroll before they click to go by anywhere at the end of the day. So my hypothesis for everyone to align on is if we can increase our watch rate, but maintain conversion rates because our stories are performing well, we'll be able to make more money. And in my case, I've even spelled out the exact creatives that I want to make 3 second changes to for the rest of the team. So this is where we're just aligning around those hypotheses and getting everyone engaged. What's going down here? Once we're here and like aligned on the brief, I'm overly simplifying content creation. In fact, I'm not even talking about it. So like this is an entire session on its own for best practices related to content creation and launch. But I'm specifically focusing on how do we actually bridge the gap between creative and media buyers. So where that then takes me to is once there's an actual creative element that's out in market, we then, instead of wanting to just like forget about it and not understand what happened, we want to make sure we take the time to learn from whatever efforts we had put in. So when I'm thinking about a retrospective, what's really, really helpful is that hypothesis I just mentioned. So because we have a hypothesis that we've aligned the team around, what we're doing is similar to science class, is we're validating that hypothesis to be true or false. So in my case here, I won't get too deep into it, but just as a reminder, we wanted to increase our 2 or 6 second watch rate while maintaining conversion rates. And what that means is to validate my hypothesis, true or false, I can actually compare right here the 3 creatives that I created. So I have what we call our control group, the version that we decided to make changes off of. We have our V1 as well as our V2. And the really clean thing is when you see it this way, you're able to say like version 3 was true. Let's lean more into that. Versus version 2, where it wasn't so true, let's stay away from the type of changes we made there. So this is how the story starts to evolve on top of each other. Okay, everybody? And the best thing about a creative sprint cycle and following the steps in a creative flywheel is that I've only shown one example today, but there's really unlimited things that you can do. And you're making sure everybody's behind the drawing board together at the same time. So what I mean by that is that you're able to then take those findings and then make sure they're memorialized to say, well, we launched a ton of things this specific week. What actually happened? What did we launch? What won? And how do we make sure we do more of it and tell that story so it moves forward? And once you're able to memorialize it, that's where you're able to look for new opportunities and additional chances to win and generate more dollars. So in my case, I've only shown one example, but the final example I'll show here is you might actually start looking outside of those first 2 second watch times and 6 second watch times and look at things more holistically from the grand scheme of things. So what that means is we might start looking into influencer performance. I have my trusty transformers here. All of you who have who you have, of course, but you can start to understand is who's actually making you money in your accounts, so you can invest more dollars and get more creatives from that specific person who's ultimately outputting the best performing creative at the end of the day. So that's why I've gone through this super quickly and I stripped out a lot of the fat. But that's why when I'm thinking about marrying and bridging the gap between creative teams and media buying teams or growth teams, it's ultimately important because we need to make the most money possible with creative being the number one lever for success. We want to make sure that both sides of the brain, people and teams, are on the same page, operating in lockstep. And creative sprints and following this creative strategy flywheel is what's going to get you there. Keep following these things. And if you have any other questions, hit me up. I promise I got your backs. And that's what I have for you all today, folks. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Evan. If anyone has any other questions, I know there was one about tagging that looks like James from the Motion team got to.
Cool.
If you guys have any other questions for Evan, drop them in the chat. You can also head over to the Motion booth. And then we do have our next prize winner. So congratulations to Jason Matthews. You've won our I Love Chamoy bundle. So the ShipUp team will be reaching out to you directly to get you that. But thanks again, Evan.
Appreciate it. Jason, I need that prize. We need to swap. I feel like that's the right trade after this one.
Totally. Have a good day.
Most definitely. Thank you, folks. I appreciate it.